Welcome to section 2. In this section, we're going to take a look at virtual elastic computing with EC2. Amazon EC2 is Amazon's elastic compute cloud, which is where the name comes from, and essentially it's their service for offering virtual servers in the cloud on the AWS platform. So in this section, we're going to take a look at the different EC2 instance types available, as well as the Amazon EC2 command line interface. We're going to take a look at how to create EC2 instances and then connect to them. We're going to take a look at a feature called roles with EC2, which is a security feature that makes it very easy to authorize your EC2 instances to connect to other AWS resources without the need for storing usernames and passwords. We're also going to take a brief look at EC2 Metadata and what it is and what it's useful for. And finally, we're going to take a look at Amazon's Elastic Load Balancer and how we can use that ELB to create a scalable web-based application. Okay folks, and welcome to the video of the course. In this video, we're going to be having a look at EC2 instance types available. So remember, EC2 is Amazon's Elastic Compute Cloud, and the Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2, is essentially just a fleet of virtual servers that you can create on demand for your applications to run on. You can think of EC2 like a general purpose virtual computing environment in the cloud. So on screen here, I've got a list of the Amazon EC2 instance types, and they're categorized up into a set of families. So starting here on screen, you can see we've got the general purpose section of EC2 instance types. Within this general purpose family, there are two subcategories. First of all, we've got the T2 instance. So you can see here, T2 instances are burstable performance instances. So they're very useful for general purpose computing applications. Think about things like Git servers, things like Jenkins servers, or any other kind of general purpose application that you might want to run in the cloud. And on the right hand side here, you can see we've got different models of T2 instance type. So for the majority of this course, we're just going to be using the T2 micro instance. So this is free tier eligible, and you can see we get one virtual CPU and 1 GB of RAM. Now the way T2 instances work are they're burstable. So what that means is you get a baseline level of CPU performance, and all the time that CPU is idle, you accumulate CPU credits, which means they're very useful if you have burstable workloads. So something like web servers or dev environments or dev databases or that kind of thing, very good because you accumulate CPU credits, and then the CPU can burst when it needs to do a small amount of work, such as building your project. So we've got a set of these available, anything up to 8 cores and 32 gig of RAM. And we also then have the M4 and the M3 instances. So these are a little bit more powerful. These are actually a little bit more sort of compute optimized. The M4 are actually newer than the M3 instance. So if you're going to pick anything, probably you would pick an M4. And you can see here these are based on Intel Xeon processors, 2.3 and 2.4 gigahertz processors. And we can go all the way up to 64 CPUs and 256 gigabytes of RAM. One thing to note here, these have dedicated EBS bandwidth. So EBS is Amazon's Elastic Block Store, and this is a really important thing to keep in mind. You can think of EBS like a SAN for your EC2 instance. So most of the newer EC2 instances actually use EBS for booting. So essentially they boot from a network device rather than the local disk volume. So having an instance that's got dedicated EBS bandwidth means that it's got essentially it's going to have more disk performance. So the EBS volume is mounted on your host and booted from. So a host with dedicated EBS bandwidth is going to be better for disk intensive applications. Now of course all EC2 instances have a network port. However, if you don't have dedicated EBS bandwidth, any other network traffic is going to be shared with your EBS volume, which means network intensive applications will actually result in slower disk performance. So if you have something that is disk intensive, having an instance with dedicated EBS bandwidth can be very helpful for your application. So moving down, we have compute dense EC2 instances or compute optimized EC2 instances. And again, we've got C4 and C3. So C3 are the older family of instances, but you can see here again the difference is they have local SSD storage, whereas the C4 ones actually only use EBS, but they do have dedicated EBS bandwidth. So the thing to really call out here is they actually use higher frequency Intel Xeon processors than some of the other instance types, but especially that they have a higher ratio of CPU cores to memory. So we can see here this one, the highest spec one, has 36 CPU cores to only 60 gig of RAM. Scrolling down, we've got the really chunky EC2 instances here. These are the X1 type instance. Or memory optimized. So these are really, really useful, particularly for in-memory databases. Perhaps you have a very, very big Redis cache, or you're running something like SAP HANA. These are the instances that you would choose for that. So we can go all the way up to an instance with almost 2 terabytes of RAM, along with SSD storage for paging, plus dedicated EBS bandwidth. So I think these are actually perhaps the most powerful type of EC2 instance available today. This X1 32X large here. Now, I should call out at the moment, before you go off and try and spin one of these up, they are very, very expensive to run. You're talking $15 or $20 per hour. So if you leave this running over a weekend or something, you are going to rack up quite a big bill. Scrolling down a little bit further, we've got the R4 instance. These are also memory optimized, quite often used for in-memory computing type applications like Hadoop and Spark, which are particularly memory intensive. And we can see here we can start an instance with anything up to 488 gigabytes of RAM. And again, we have the older R3 instance, which again, the difference predominantly being that they have SSD storage as well as EBS storage. Scrolling down a little bit further, and we have some accelerated computing instances, and these are really very much special purpose instance types. So in this family, we've got 2 different types of GPU instance. So firstly, the P2, which has very, very high performance network, up to 20 gigabit per second networking, along with very, very high performance NVIDIA GPUs. So the use case for this may be high performance databases that can leverage GPUs, machine learning, fluid dynamics, computational finance, or that kind of thing. And we've also got the G2 type, which is again graphics optimized, but perhaps more with a focus on 3D applications and video encoding. So the difference between the G2 and the P2 predominantly is the networking available, as well as how powerful the GPUs are. And finally, in the special purpose ones, we've got the F1 instance. So the F1 instance type contains an FPGA. An FPGA is a field programmable gate array and is used for specific types of hardware acceleration. Next, we have storage optimized instances. So we have several tiers of storage optimized instance, depending if you want a large volume of storage or high performance storage. So for example, here, these i3 instances of a very, very high I/O. So they're very handy for things like Cassandra, MongoDB, or other in-memory databases. And you can see here that you can specify very high performance SSDs on those instances. Next, we have dense storage instances. So these are for instances that need to have a lot of disk storage. Again, also useful for frameworks like Hadoop or data warehouse type use cases. So you can see here we can go all the way up to 48 terabytes of storage. And if you scroll down a little bit further, we also have the instance type matrix. So that gives you a bit of a comparison between all the instance types, along with some of the more advanced features that some of these instances support. Now, I also just want to quickly show you the AWS Management Console. So you can see I've got this open in another tab here. So when you first sign into your AWS account, you're going to see something like this. And you can see you also have all of the services listed here under various categories, some of which we talked about in the previous section. Now, what I want to show you quickly is if you just click on EC2 here and wait for this to load and click on Launch an Instance, your screen might look a little bit different. As if it's the first time you're using EC2, which it probably will be, you'll get a splash screen. But I'm just going to click Launch an Instance and you'll have a similar option. We're just going to click on Amazon Linux here. Don't worry about what this means for the moment. I just want to show you what's on the next screen. And here you can see we have the option to select any instance type that we want from the selection that I was just talking about a few moments ago from the previous tab. So we've got compute optimized, GPU compute, memory optimized instances here. If you hover over this, it gives you a description of what it is. So memory optimized, for example, is the lowest cost per gigabyte of memory. Storage optimized, again, what you can use it for, some example use cases. But for most of this course, we're just going to use this, the T2 Micro. So again, 1 virtual CPU, 1 gig of RAM, and you can see here in this little green box, it's free tier eligible. So that means you get 750 hours of T2 Micro compute time per month with your free AWS tier. So that's everything I wanted to cover in this video, folks.